I was asking if I should stand here. I'd like to circulate as a lawyer in court, in American courts. Okay, I think many think I will speak as a lawyer, but I wouldn't. I think Shegun is expecting me to speak as a lawyer on such a very topical issue. I've written probably about 60 articles in Nigerian newspapers on the subject. But just let me quickly dispense of the technical question of devolution and go on to speak as a Nigerian. Devolution is simply the statutory devolving of powers from the exclusive list. We have two lists, exclusive and concurrent. There are 98 items of power, and if you read the schedule, you will see how skewed in favor of the federal government powers are. So that 98. 68 are exclusive to the federal government, and the state government cannot dare approach the 68. The other 30, where you would have thought that the poor state government can, is called the concurrent list, which means that if the federal government takes a bite at one of the items, the state government is pushed away because it is said to cover the field. In all reality, the state government is impotent because on the 68, in the exclusive, and the 30, the federal government has supremacy. So, without question, the question would be answered in the affirmative, that devolving power is a good idea. But unfortunately, the question is not complete. The real question should be, is devolution of powers the solution to our problems for now? To which I will answer, no. All the speakers, the doctor there, Shegun, even your pastor, implied it. So, somebody went, or a group of thieves, it was a very important story, which I think we need to reflect on. A group of thieves visited to steal, but they were hungry. There's a lesson in that. And they saw bread and ate it. And we're talking about devolution. We should be talking about hunger. Hunger. Try to read Thomas Piketty on capital. The biggest problem we have in Nigeria is exclusion. I see them on the streets. People are poor. I wish Pastor Boju had brought one of the excluded persons to be here to talk, to make the discussion more complete. They won't listen to you. Go and talk about devolution on the streets. That's nonsense. They are hungry. And therefore, we're not at a stage where devolution makes sense. That's number one. The second problem, I think, is that you need to resolve disorder before constitutional order. There are two separate things. And for those of us who remember the 80 Years' War in Europe, which was followed by the 30 Years' War, the Europeans understood that unless they had peace, they could have no constitutional order. And so all the powers came together in a region of Germany, known as Westphalia, and they established the Peace of Westphalia, which still governs international order. So my submission is that with Boko Haram in the northeast, with banditry and criminality in the northwest, with Boko Haram now penetrating into the north central, with chaos and contagion in the southeast, IPOP, with piracy in the south-south. Nigeria has the worst piracy incident in the world. It's no longer about stealing crude. It's about kidnapping crew so you can get ransom. The whole country is in contagion. And you can't talk about devolution. The index of failed states ranks Nigeria 14 out of about 200 countries. We are a fragile state. We are in low-grade civil war. We can't talk about devolution. We need to, first of all, discuss peace and order. There's so much chaos, and I think the point made by Dr. Mole is so apt, that you can devolve power as a process to the same set of people. And I'm happy that Kayode Fayemi, my good friend, will be on, because he is the chairman of the Governors Forum, yet they are not obeying the Constitution. The men who want devolution. I went to court, I got 2 judgments in respect of financial autonomy, and they are not obeying the orders. So I think it's in the Bible that it was said, to whom much small is, if you give somebody small and he can't hold it, how do you give him more? The state governors have paralyzed the judiciary, and they're looking for more power. No, they haven't shown anything. Well, speaking for myself, they haven't shown me that they are constitutionally responsible, because they are not obeying the Constitution. The small they have got, they are not obeying it. So what's to say that giving them more powers, that they will actually, do better for the people? So the real thing is to ask, how did we all come together as a country, Nigeria? And I always go back to Bola Ige. 2 questions he asked, brilliant questions. 1, do we want to be in the country called Nigeria? And it's a very serious question. It's not enough to say Nigeria is an indissoluble, all those things they say. No. It is open to question. Do we? Somehow I feel that the consensus is that we would like to be in a country called Nigeria. I have that feeling. Do you agree? I hope you really agree. The second question posed by Bola Ige was, if we do want to be in a country called Nigeria, by what political arrangements? And it always reminds me of a marriage. I'm now married for 42 years. And, well, thanks for the clap. And may your own last that long too. Now, when I was getting married, there was no interference by dad or mom. It was my choice. So I said, Dad, here's my wife I want to marry. Her name is Lily. I said, oh, really? That's good. We'll support you. But let us reverse it and say, Olisa, we found a wife for you. Her name is Lillian. Marry. Here's the certificate. I said, Daddy, I'm not interested in Lillian. He says, but you have to. So they issue us a certificate. And we are married. What binds us is the certificate, not the union. I hope you get the difference. What binds us is the certificate, So we are not at peace. We're always fighting. The certificate was given to us in 1914, by... We did not, by our own voluntary agreement, decide to be one. And of the three political powers that have ruled us, we've never had a conversation free from their interference. The colonials, the military, and now the civil government. Not civil democratic, civil government. We have to have that conversation. That's my theory. We need to have a conversation that is autochthonous, a conversation that is driven by our own desire to be one nation, a conversation that we sit around the table and say, here is how we want to live. We haven't had it. That is the result of our problems, not devolution. Devolution is a very good thing. It's a very good concept. But like Dr. Moller said, we've seen political structures where even our own centrifugal system works for them, where there's a very strong federal government, and things work. So it's not necessarily... In fact, when I was MBA president, we had Mr. George Anderson, president of the Forum of Federations, come and give us a talk. And I liked his conclusion. It was, we were then in the thick of constitutional conferences. Do not assume that a constitution will resolve your problems. Don't. There is a lot more to a good country than a constitution. Which takes me back to, okay, before 1914, who exactly were we? Before 1914? Well, we had various strong ethnocentric kingdoms. We had the kingdom of Benin, which was then known as Edo. And many of you may not know, and if you like, you can Google it. If I ask the question, what is the largest man-made contraption in history? Dr. Mode, do you know? Can you hazard a guess? No? When I was asked the question that day, I said the Great Wall of China. But the guy said no. And if you Google it, you will see that in the 11th century, the largest man-made contraption was the Great Walls of Benin, this Benin. So you can see that we are a great people. If you go to the British Museum, the Benin Bronze section, you will see what they did. You remember the story of Mansa Musa and how the southern part of his kingdom was Kano. Guinness Book of Records records him as the richest man in the world. Ever. So we are made up of great kingdoms, unfortunately compressed and pushed together without agreement. And our ethnic animosities remain, unfortunately, whether we like it or not. They remain, and they are in volcanic clash. And unless we resolve the tensions, those tensions, if we don't resolve it, we're not likely to do well. So I liken this issue of devolution to a group of engineers who have been invited to look at structural damage of a 15-story building. So you can see cracks all over. And then the owner has said, what do I do to save my building? Oh, when they go up and down the various stairs, they see that there's a lot of load between the 4th and the 9th floors. Too much load. And they then say, you know what? Spread the load. There's nothing on the first floor. There's nothing on the 14th floor. That is devolution. If you spread the load, the power will be distributed so evenly that the building will stand. But the foundation engineer goes and takes a look at the foundation. And his report is, okay, yeah, you might succeed in spreading the load, but unfortunately, the foundation is so flawed that eventually the building will collapse. So, we have a choice of priority. I think Nigeria's foundational structures are not strong enough. And that's why we see all these, crises and challenges. The foundational structure requires to be addressed. And that's the reason we have so much turmoil and so much tension. If we had two speakers here, they might take a different view. I think we're all from the same community, speaking the same language. If you had my revered Ebon here, who is now the leader of Afenifere, he wouldn't agree. He would say, in fact, not even devolution, it is the language of restructure. And as you well know, restructure has so many fathers. Nobody even knows what it means. But there are some Nigerians who believe very strongly that the resolution of our problems is in restructure. I take a more soft approach. I don't like the word restructure for two reasons. The first is it's unclear what it means. And the second is the southern argument in the restructure debate differs from that of the north. And I feel that if there's got to be a successful scheme of restructure, the language must carry both the south and the north. It must be agreeable. And in many fora, I've argued that the southern cacophony terrifies the northern establishment, whether you like it or not. It terrifies them. So we must change the language, for which Pa Ayo Adebajo has chastised me. In fact, he invited me to lunch and said, you can't sit on that chair. I said, well. So it shows how divisive the problem has become. So we must therefore go beyond devolution. And don't get me wrong, devolution makes sense technically. It makes sense. There's too much power in the hands of Abuja. So it's important that you take it out of Abuja and spread it. It's the so-called principle of subsidiarity. The local government is where the power base lies. Things like refuse, health, education, the basic things. It should be there. I was surprised when my good friend, Festus Keyamo, I saw him in the National Assembly arguing over jobs for local government. Minister, job for local government. They wanted to give employment. Federal government says we want to generate employment to deal with the unemployment situation. So we're going to assign jobs within the 774 local government areas. I don't understand what Festus thought he was doing. It's not his responsibility. It's not his responsibility. This is local government matter. So you can see how skewed, power has become. So, technically speaking, I support devolution. Technically speaking. If devolution means taking powers from the federal government, like the metaphor of the building, and spreading it across so that the building is balanced. That's the whole idea. But the big question is, will it resolve our problems? I think that's the key question. If the answer is yes, then by all means I support it. If we took powers from the federal government, handed it to the states, is there a likelihood that the states would pass it on and strengthen the local governments? I don't see that. And I'm happy to hear what His Excellency Fayemi will say. I don't see that happening. I don't see a single governor in Nigeria who has demonstrated any resolve to pass power to the local governments. In fact, if the truth should be said, there are more problems in the states in terms of governance than the federal government. We over-concentrate on the federal government. And even if you look at the list, there's a lot. Femi Falana wrote a paper when he was invited by my brother, Rotimi Akeredolu, to present the inaugural when he was being sworn in as governor for the second time in Ondo. And he gave a brilliant dissertation. He showed that even the powers given to the governors of the states, they're not even using it. All they do is every month, cap in hand, Abuja. They're not even using the powers that they have fully. And they want more. So we need to see a more accountable. In fact, a theory of mine would be that if the governors were to fully exercise their powers, things might be better. I'm happy now that the governor of Lagos State has enacted the Public Accountability and Anti-Corruption legislation. And the question is, can he? Of course, he can. Because the power to create anti-corruption agencies is concurrent. It's concurrent to the extent that it does not conflict with the powers of the EFCC, because people are already ascribing, see, Nigeria can never win. They're already ascribing political motives. Why has he suddenly created an anti-corruption agency? So there's a lot. In fact, in Cross River, as a result of the problems they have with migration between Cameroon and Cross River, they created a director of immigration. But immigration is technically an exclusive matter. And you can go on and on. So my point is, it's not enough to just say, let's have devolution. There's got to be a lot more. Governance. And that's why I always like to read and reread Chinua Achebe's book, small little book, The Trouble with Nigeria. It's not the Constitution. The trouble with Nigeria, leadership. After all, even though the United Kingdom might not be an example of the best type of democracy, but they have no constitution. They don't have a constitution. Even America under Trump, it wasn't the constitution. It was strong leadership by the governors that resisted Trump's undemocratic ways. So a lot depends on accountability, on leadership qualities coming out of our governors. Because at the end of the day, the federal government is only a small fraction of the Nigerian equation. But the governors seem to have retreated and do no more than go to Abuja to collect. We want to see more action on the part of our governors, a lot more action. If we resolve the issue of Nigeria's political problems, if we resolve the issue of Nigeria's leadership problems, there's also the issue of followers. Followers. I think that is a very important point. But don't forget that the problem of followership is poverty. You can't expect that things will change without us dealing with the problem of exclusion that I have described and poverty. But if we get through all this, and we have to have a discussion, my plea would be to say, let us avoid the repeated national conferences. We've had far too many. We've had IBB, I believe, was the first, if I'm right. We've had Abacha. We've had OBJ. We had Jonathan. So we need to do something new. We need to do something new. And I think what is new is that the process of constitution making must generate and derive from Nigerians. The National Assembly has said they will amend the constitution. And I know that this is the third National Assembly. It started with the 6th, 7th, 8th, I think the 7th. Every National Assembly process engages in constitution making, but the results are not clear. You can't exclude the people. So Nigerians must be involved in constitution making, number one. I'm prepared to concede that the National Assembly, because you can't do away with them, they are there. So they must play a role. They can convene the process. They can convene the process. But beyond convening the process, the National Assembly must allow Nigerians to legitimize and validate the process. Now, here's where I think the Afeniferes and the Ohaneses and the Pandefs and the Middle Belt Congress have roles to play. If we admit or are prepared to say that they represent us, then I'd like to see a conversation, because I was at the National Assembly, no, the National Conference of 2014, and it was too unwieldy. And I'm not about to say we should have yet another national conference. But if we agree that the modernization of the ancient kingdoms of Nigeria by the late Alex Ekweme, when he reformulated those ancient kingdoms and called them geopolitical zones, I think those geopolitical zones can form the basis of a new Nigeria. I'd like to see the ethnic, for instance, in the southeast, we have the Ohanese. Let us say they speak for the Igbos. In the southwest, we have the Afenifere. Let us say they speak for the Yorubas. Let there be some discussion. In the national conference, of the 500 members, only 90 or thereabouts came from the ethnic nationalities. And I entirely support Professor Wabeze's view that discussing Nigeria's political and constitutional future rests squarely with the ethnic nationalities. The ethnic nationalities, not the MBA, not the medical association, not the professional groups. It rests squarely with, because I don't have, as former president of the MBA, I don't control any territory. But Ohanese speaks for the Igbos. So why can't we agree amongst the representations that I have described? Why can't these men sit down? But it will take the honesty of either the present leadership or whatever is to come. Because one thing happens in life. The only man I know who has ever diminished his power in the world, only one person who knows, only one man has ever diminished his power. I thought this was a house of God. Only one man ever. Eh? No. Eh? Who? Oh dear. Only one man has ever diminished his power. John the Baptist. It can't happen. Do you think anybody will diminish his power? Maybe Gorbachev. Maybe Gorbachev. But only one person. Because for the National Assembly to really sit down and decide to make Nigeria a great country means that their power will be diminished. That's the problem. And they aren't about to do that. So the question remains, and that's why, we must salute Pastor Oju. Because in his speech, I'm happy that in spite of your doubts, because I have doubts sometimes. Do you know how long I've done this? It's going to 40 years. And sometimes people say, are you not tired? Are you not tired? Talk. I think you've joined too. Talk. Shegun has talked and talked. But we must keep talking. It's the only way. Because if we don't, then we give up. So we must keep. When I was invited, I was rejuvenated. I said, I'll come and, add my voice. Because it's that voice of people that checks the government. Government is never going to, anywhere in the world, diminish their power. So that's the problem with this question. Do you think that, without wanting to criticize any of the past presidents, but I dare say that if all of them wanted to resolve this problem, we won't be discussing it today. We'll not be discussing it. So let us also understand that there's an inherent weakness in what we are doing, because we are confronting people that are uninterested in diminishing their power. If that is the case, I remember, I think the 7th Assembly, when I was invited as a resource person, and I argued that, no, I didn't think that this was the way to go. They wanted us to do town hall meetings to discuss constitutional reform, devolution of powers, to go from town to town. And in the evening, when I was having a beer with a friend, I said, is this really about consulting the people or the money involved? It was not about the people. It was about the money that they will share. And this is the 3rd session. Who knows how much money has been devoted? So my problem, and it's the challenge that we all have to take home and think through, how do we really resolve the Nigerian problem? That's the biggest problem. How do we? Because this is just a small aspect of our problem. How are we going to? What model? Is it by revolution? I don't know. I'm asking. I don't know. Is it by passing the responsibility to the current crop of our political elite? I'm not sure. So where is the solution? Is the solution in generating public advocacy awareness? I don't know. Having been part of struggles back in the time of IBB, I remember my wife telling me on the day we were going to have our 5 million man march. You recall the 2 million man march by Abacha in Abuja. So we came up. Well, I was a coward. I didn't, but my boys came up with the idea of a 5 million man march. I said, wow, 5 million man march. Where would we find 5 million? Eventually, we're only about 20. But it made a point, and it taught me a lesson. It made a point. It was the counter-argument. Everywhere was silent, completely silent. I think Shegun wrote it in his book. It was, silence. There was I sitting by my TV on that fateful day, and I said, by this time Abacha had taken 4 parties. Remember the Bola Ige's, the leprous fingers. So I said, no. Abacha cannot take GMPP. He took it and set a world record. a presidential candidate on 5 political parties. A presidential candidate. I'm giving these examples to show you that the odds are stacked against us. No matter what you want to say, and you better believe it. The odds to go from a government of completely selfish prebendal rulers to a liberal democracy. There are 4 cycles that oscillate. It will take a long time. And I'm not surprised that having started this at 28, I'm now 68. And we're nowhere in sight. So it's going to be a very big battle. The question that is posed today is a nucleus of a larger question. It's a larger issue of why this great country, in spite of its natural resources and human endowment, is at the bottom. If you look at all the development indices, you see where we are. At the bottom. Once you leave Nigeria, I'm sure you know about NASA, the National Aeronautic Space Administration. You recall Apollo 13. It was fired by a Yoruba man, Director of Space Services. He gives the final go. And I said, if this guy were here, he would have no job. Look at all the guys working on COVID in the US. Look at people of talent. But once we're here, the talent disappears because of prebendal politics. So that is the question that agitates me. Not so much this. How can we overcome the wall? How can we break it down? Who will break it down? The media, we've tried, ended up in jail. Human rights movements, we've tried. We ended up in jail. The Ghanaians, the Femi Falanas, everybody. So where is the change going to come from? I think it's a fundamental question that, for me, this question poses. Where are we going to make the change, and how? Because I don't believe the National Assembly can do it. I don't believe. Unless you have a different view. I don't believe that the National Assembly can do it. Everybody is now all about 2023. And that's very sad when we have extreme poverty in our nation. Extreme. People who cannot find food in a week. And I see them because I have my shipping law practice in Apapa. And so when I go there and see the indescribable hunger, we should not be talking. We should not be talking about, challenges. The challenge is right down at the bottom. How those people can be lifted. That's why for me, my number one problem that requires resolution would be how to bring in the excluded people. If you can bring in the excluded, people who sometimes earn little, even police. On Friday, my driver went home, so I took a taxi to the office. I was reading a book, going to Apapa. You all know the Apapa traffic, don't you? So my foolish driver, but I won't blame him because he wanted to drop and come. He now took one way. Police. And the man said, so we begged and begged and begged and begged. And the policeman said, not even the governor of Lagos State can interfere in this matter. Of course, you know where he was going. They now said, there are choices. They told us there are choices. But I won't discuss what those choices were. But they took us somewhere I never knew existed. Right under in Igomu area, where a bank, and that surprised me, that the difference between the formal and informal sector is just a road. So I was on the formal sector in 1 minute. The next, I was in the informal sector with a bank supporting the police with ATM and POS. And you say this is Nigeria. And you say devolution is the issue. No. Poverty is the issue. And I didn't blame the policemen. Honestly. Just like Pastor Bojo's story. People, I'm repeating the story because it seems not to have sunk. A man comes to your house to steal, and the most important thing is the bread. Think about it. A man comes to your house to steal. Having stolen, he steals your bread to eat because of hunger. That's the way I saw those policemen. So I had compassion on them. But it brought to me to the fore that we are in deep. I am refrained from using the word I want to use because I'm on channels. But I'm sure you all know the word. Because it's that bad. It's that bad. We must go home and think through what can be done. When the NSAS thing started, I was so happy. My daughter was part of it. You see, you know what they did? They said, Daddy, you know what? This is not for you. You have no skills. I said, why? Because you know how to manipulate this what do you call it? You know how to manipulate. In fact, they told me that even my iPhone, I don't know how to use it well. I said, okay. They manipulated it, went around the banks, raised money. No one knew how. I didn't ask questions. I only begged to advise. They said I was too old. When it failed, I said, well, you see? You have no experience. You are talking to a man who has a PhD in street protest. And you say, I can't advise. Youth 1 ignored Youth 2. There were two movements. Youth 1 got carried away by their success, limited success, because it was striking at Piketty's doctrine of inequality. So Youth 1, rather than build on their gains, began to eat. In fact, I was asking them, is this a restaurant? Did you see the food they were bringing? Big mistake. Youth 2 was begging to be connected to the action because they had structures and troops. Youth 1 ignored them, and Youth 2 went on a wild rampage. I've always stopped to think what would have happened if the two had connected. So we, even though we are not, or could I be a youth? Maybe. I could be a youth, can't I? Yeah? No? No? Why? I'm old. But I've got wisdom. And that's the point. I've got wisdom. And when I say me, I don't mean me as a person. So please, youths, this country belongs to you. It belongs to you. But are you doing enough to answer the question posed? Are you doing enough? Because you have the numbers. Sometimes, don't get me wrong if I say this, so please, don't get me wrong. But sometimes, I'm offended by when women say, we are being marginalized. Then I say, by who? When you are more in number. So, why don't you mobilize to vote yourselves in? The same with the youths. I said to you, you are more than us. So why don't you mobilize? Because if the women and the youth can wake up, the country will change. My closing point would be, this country is far from where it should be. This country will not achieve anything, even if the National Assembly were to say, in our wisdom, we hereby devolve powers. Nothing will change. Because you are changing a system, like you said, you are changing a system with the same actors. And I challenge the governors. Anyone who likes can sue me. I will defend myself. The governors ought to do a lot more. They ought to play a lot more role. And the media should concentrate more on the governors than the president. Because if the governors were working, we wouldn't be in this mess. It's the fact that do you know that the governors complain about the Inspector General of Police? Just to take this last point. Well, the president has seen that constitutionally he is limited by the governors if the Council of Police would sit. If they would sit. But I'm not sure they sit. I'm not sure how many governors have requisitioned. So the president exercises the sole authority to appoint and remove. But it is the governors that actually have that power. The only place where no, it doesn't require clapping. That's in the Constitution. It's in the Constitution. So you should actually write a letter to the governors to ask them, why aren't you doing the jobs that you should do? Electricity. The governors can, if they wanted to. They can. There are all kinds of things the governors can do. But they are reduced to sending their people to Abuja. When I was on the NJC, and I'm now speaking to the fact that people have power, but they don't use it. Now, the NJC, when I was a member, under Chief Justice Aluma Mukhtar, the first female CJN, I said, my lord, I disagree. I don't agree at all. Because she didn't put me there. I was there statutorily. So I wasn't afraid. You can't remove me. You know, if you can't remove somebody, it's power. She can't remove me. I was there by virtue of, what we say in Latin, qua offici. By virtue of office, I was there. So I said, you are wrong, Madam CJN. You can't be sending the executive secretary to a budget officer in the Ministry of Finance with the NJC budget. Have you read the Constitution? I said, okay, don't worry. Since the NJC, and of course, when it was discussed, I wasn't surprised. The CJN practically appoints all the members, except for the 5 members from the bar. So the motion was defeated. That's what impelled me. I said, you know what? I'm going to court on your behalf. And I knew that they liked it. So I went to court, I won. So I came back and said, okay, we've won the thing now. Why are you still going to... Look, you see, this is the problem. You don't want to exercise the powers you are given. The other man will tread on it. So it is important. You know, devolution is only a design. What about the one you already have? If you don't exercise it, they will take it. They will take it from you. We've seen that in a small way, in the way in which the SSS interfered with judges, until the NBA backed. And they got back their strength. So devolution is not just a word, a concept. It's the energy that you have to believe in the power that you can exercise. And here, my criticism really goes to the governors. I don't want to talk about local government, because that's another story. That would require... when is this thing done? This platform? So that the local government failure will be platform discussion 2022. Because that's a whole story of how vagabonds and thieves have taken over the place. It's a whole story. So devolution won't solve anything. If, like you say, we all abandon... some of my friends, should I call their names? And they're all youth, so One came to me and said, Presido, as they call me, Presido. I said, what is it? I'm considering running for president. I said, what? You mean local government? He said, no, president. Okay, do you have money? He said, don't worry. And your point is so apt. To be chairman of some of the local governments is more important too, because there you hone your skills and learn. So this has to do with leadership too. Leadership. How can a man of 35 aspire to be Nigerian president when his only qualification was that he was president of Students' Union? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So maybe next year we shall interrogate the gaps in the local government system. Because it's all of this put together that makes a country strong. Not a constitution. Keep it in mind. A constitution is merely the legal agreement. So if Segun now has been married to his wife without a certificate, which we call common law marriage, do you think that, your wife will say, Segun, you know what? I have booked with the priest. We are going to get certificate on our 18th anniversary. Do you think that certificate makes your marriage better? It doesn't. It doesn't. It confers some degree of, but it doesn't. It's the union. It's the union. It's the union, the love between you and your wife that makes it strong. So I think it's a point that also needs to be made, because there's too much talk about constitution. It's only a phrase. You can have the best constitution with the worst leaders, and nothing will happen. In fact, you'll be you know what Abacha did to us? When we were traveling the world and saying, that time I don't know why the Western governments use the National Human Rights Commission as an example of a democratic and non-democratic, non-respecting country under what is called the Paris Principles. So Abacha simply went and formed his own. He created one. So okay, tell me what you say now. You say, National Human Rights Commission is the standard bearer of a good government. Okay, I passed my own. It didn't change anything. So a constitution will not change anything if you have the same actors as was described in Russia. All the resources were merely privatized among the same people. The owner of Chelsea Football Club was part of them. So all the privatizations that took place under BPE, okay, how has it benefited? It might have been better to perhaps make those state enterprises more proficient than to privatize them. And remember, this is something that we shouldn't say too strongly. The second most powerful nation in the world, which you all know. Why are you all quiet? It is not democratic. Keep that in mind. It has brought out 700 million people out of poverty. It has no constitution. It has only got 9 men ruling it. But when I watch channel 448, which if you don't, please do, you will see what China has done with its people. Yet it is not democratic. So sometimes, and I put this as food for thought, if we were to ask Nigerians, not you guys here who eat well and have jobs, if we were to ask Nigerians outside, between development and democracy, which would you choose? Sir? Development. Keep that in mind.